Okay, so where we're at is we need to connect multiple output transparencies into this input 3D. So I'm going to connect this up again. I can minimize these two windows. And if I go to my script editor, there's this mail command. So you don't have to understand scripting at all. Just copy this, paste it down here. And I can see that the iOpacity left file, that's the name of the node, dot output transparency, that's the name of the attribute, is going to be connected to the plus minus average 1 dot input 3D 0. Okay, so that's a lot of information. Well, all we need to do is change this to the appropriate node, which also has the same output transparency attribute. And we're going to connect to the plus minus average 1 input 3D square bracket 1 this time. And arrays in programming are what we call zero indexed, meaning the first connection always goes to 0. And then the second one it goes to 1, and the third one goes to 2, so on and so forth. Okay, so now if I press Control A to select that line, and then press Enter on the number keypad, it will execute that code without deleting it. That's kind of useful. Okay, so now I've got two things connected. It's worth taking a look at this real quick. But we'll do it in the connection editor. So output transparency is, well, let me do this one. Output transparency is connected to the input 3D 1, which didn't even exist a moment ago. Okay, so we're forcing that. Okay, so now I need to do the same thing. I'm going to grab this node as name. So I'm pretending like I'm going to rename it, but I'm not really going to do it. Just being the lazy typer. And then I can paste it here. And I can make this my third connection to that node. And I press Enter. Okay, now all three of these are connected to this plus minus average node. Now, right now, if I add all three of these together, I have something that's even more than white, because it's adding these numbers together numerically. Okay, now I'll see if I can't explain this well. If there is a spot where it's black in one image, that's a 0 value. And it's white in the other two, so the total for the pixels where it's black in one image is 2, right? If it's white in all three images, then it's a total value of 3. Okay, we're getting into the actual numbers of what's stored in the image. So if I need to pull that back down into the range that's appropriate for a transparent, like a regular image. So I need to duplicate my plus minus average node, press Control D, and this time I'm going to use my plus minus average node as a subtraction. Okay, so I'm going to connect the output 3D into the input 3D of my new plus minus average node. Okay, so now that's connected. And I've got three possible inputs in here because I duplicated it. If I hadn't duplicated it, it would only have a list of one item. Okay, so if that being the case, I can select that, press Control A on my keyboard, pull up my attribute editor, and by default, a plus minus average node operation is set to sum. It's going to add everything together. Well, this time I need to subtract. And I'm going to set these input 3D 1 values. I'm not connecting an attribute to it. I'm just going to set some hard code information in there. So I'm going to change that to 2, 2, and 2, because I need to subtract 2 from all the images That way, if it's white in all three images on all three layers, then I've subtracted out 2 of that. So it's not triply white, it's only single white. And if it was layered with black on one, then it's going to be black, because I subtracted 2. Okay, maybe have to chew on that to be able to fully understand it. Okay, so that's done. I need to verify that this one is sum, just in case it is. Operation is sum. And now I can connect this in to the same place that the file used to connect on the material, which was the transparency. So I'm going to grab the output 3D, and I'm going to connect that to transparency. Oh, it's going to make me a liar. I just did this last night. Let's see what happens when I render. Okay, so it's actually there. It's just not showing up in here. Okay, so let's make my render look nicer. This is a extra piece of information. So I want to add a smooth node to this mesh so that it can look like this while it's rendered. So I'm going to go to Mesh, Smooth, and I'm going to add in a few divisions so it can be really smooth. Okay, and then
so if it reset a little bit back to black, how come the computer is gray?
well, that's transparency. There's no color information, so it must be gray on the inside.
Okay.
But anyway, so that's that. Now I'm going to show you one other method of smoothing that works with mental ray, which is what I would highly recommend you use. It's a lot more high-powered renderer, and it doesn't do a permanent smooth like this one does, although you could rig this up just like anything else, and you could tell it to not have any divisions most of the time, and then before rendering you could set that to 3 or 4 or whatever you want. But if you go too high, you're going to crash your computer.
And that's a bad thing?
That's a bad thing. So I'm going to undo to before I did that smooth. Before I did the smooth, I still have the network connected.
If you froze the transformation to delete history, would it get rid of that network you created?
This?
Yeah.
No, the shader networks are not. They're not considered history.
Okay.
The history we're talking about is deformer history.
Gotcha.
And this is not deformer history. Okay, now the mental ray is smoothing a mesh, and this is ideal. To my understanding, the mental ray smoother smooths the mesh up until every pixel in the render is represented by a single face. So every pixel of your image is represented by a single face by the mental ray smoother. Okay, so if you select your mesh and go to rendering editors, you'll have to have the mental ray active. If you don't have that, let me show you that real quick. You go to your settings, preferences, plugin manager, scroll down to the very bottom, and then you'll have this Maya TOMR, Maya to mental ray. You'll want to load that and tell it to auto load, at least I do. And then you'll have this rendering editors, mental ray menu. And then you want to go to the approximation editor, and with your mesh selected, if you go to the subdivision section, you click create. Now when this is rendered, it's going to be smooth every time. Although my user interface, it will never be smooth. So if I render it, oh, I lied. So what I did is